pastor of San Sebastian Catholic Church out on the northwest side of town by the Outlets Mall, and I was honored to be contacted and asked if I might be able to come. So I thought it was going to be at 2 o'clock, and I first said I can't make it at 2 o'clock. I've got a Spanish Mass at 12 noon that carries over. But in the end, someone said, whoever was in charge, maybe Tracy, that we could do it at 2:30, and I said I'll be there. So I appreciate if you made adjustments for me. I'm not coming particularly to do a Catholic ceremony, but I'm a Catholic, so it'll have a little bit of that in it. But whatever your faith traditions are, I hope that you'll be prepared to share them, or at least bring them and help us focus at this particular point. And I brought holy water with me, and I don't know whether if you can believe in holy water or not. You don't need to, but at least it's water. It's good for the garden, so some good will happen from it. Okay, I'd like to start though with a story that probably you know, but maybe slips out of your attention. It's from the Gospel of John, chapter 20, and Jesus has died in a very gruesome way, and a victim in many ways of failed friends and a potent political system, a colonial system of the Roman Empire, taking control of a country and defending against all comers. So Jesus is, for all intents and purposes, dead. His disciples hear that his body's not in the tomb. They go running, Peter and John, to the tomb, and when they look in, they can't find him. They don't quite understand, and they leave. But all too often, like so many men who want to get to it and get the action done and get on with the next thing, the real action is going to occur afterwards. They walk off. Mary Magdalene is there, and she says, is weeping beside the tomb. Even as she wept, she stopped to peer inside. Now, Peter and John had already peered inside, and all they saw was what wasn't there. No body. But she sees two angels in dazzling robes. One was seated at the head and the other at the foot of the place where Jesus' body had lain. Woman, they asked her, why are you weeping? And if she'd felt a little stronger, she probably would have hit them up the side of the head. Why do you think I'm weeping? The one I love is dead. And not only dead, but the insult is they've stolen his body. But you probably know she doesn't do that. She doesn't hit them up the side of the head. They're angels. She answered, because the Lord has been taken away, and I do not know where they have put him. She had no sooner said this than she turned around and caught sight of Jesus standing there, but she didn't know him. Woman, he asked her, why are you weeping? Who is it you are looking for? She supposed he was the gardener. Drew used the gardening angel, it says over there, on that plaque. First case of mistaken identity in Christianity. Christianity starts with the resurrection. Jesus is mistaken for the gardener. Is he or isn't he? Maybe he is the gardener, as well as being Jesus, but Mary doesn't recognize him. She supposed he was the gardener, so she said, Sir, if you are the one who carried him off, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus then said to her, Mary. She turned to him and said in Hebrew, Rabboni, meaning teacher. Jesus then said, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Rather go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went to the disciples. I have seen the Lord, she announced. Then she reported what he had said to her. Now, what I would like to suggest in this moment particularly, but really at any given time, it is the purpose of Christianity for 2,000 years and however many more years we have a chance to live it. It's the purpose of Christianity to make that same mistake over and over again. Every time you look at the gardener, you're seeing Jesus. Every time you look at the plumber, you're seeing Jesus. When you look at the teacher and the teacher looks at the students, and the neighbors look at each other, and when you go next door to ask your neighbor to keep the dog from barking so much so early in the morning, you're looking at Jesus and Jesus is looking back at you. It's a concerted effort, a deliberate effort to make a mistake. Because I think the neighbor is really nobody, or he's out to get me, or the teacher doesn't understand me, or the plumber's charging me too much, or the gardener is ignoring me. And all of those things may be true, but we're supposed to try to make the mistake and see the face of Jesus, and eventually we do. I didn't see Drew that often. Our church does Dining with Dignity downtown once a month, second Tuesday each month, but everybody knew him, and the picture when I heard his name, I didn't know his name, but looked at the picture and I said, oh yeah, I know him. He's the gardener, he's Jesus, he's my brother, he's the person I don't know. And I'm challenged constantly to do that, to see that way. I hope you have the ability. I could try to have it built into my glasses. I'm practically blind. You all just disappeared when I took off my glasses, and I have astigmatism and creeping myopia and all sorts of things. But if I could have it ground into my lens, such that when I put the glasses on, I could see Jesus, I would be a better follower. That's our challenge, I think, today. We celebrate the life of a brother who was the gardener and yet was also, in many ways, Jesus. I think Tracy's going to ask you to share, Tracy, but you go ahead and tell them, and we're going to have a prayer or two at the end. But in between, I'd love to hear. I wanted to know which of the little kids in the cowboy outfit was.
That's my dad and my Aunt Renee.
Oh, okay. I couldn't tell, but I remember wanting that same cowboy outfit.
Their mom made those.
Oh.
Their mom made those
Good.
outfits.
Please share with us. I'm going to pull the chair.
Okay, y'all. So, thanks for coming. I'm sorry we all had to meet like this. And I don't know what to say. So basically I just kind of brought us all together because I just wanted to hear more about my dad and the time he wasn't with me down here, you know? And that's kind of why I brought all y'all here, just to tell me some stuff about him that I haven't heard, you know? And I can tell y'all some stuff about him that y'all didn't know, you know? Because he was a really large personality. And I think y'all all know that about him. And it is the biggest loss of my life. And I think y'all all know why, you know. So I would love it if y'all would just take over and somebody just start telling stories, you know. And that's kind of where it's at. And this is Emma, my friend that's been with me. She's probably the first friend of mine that my dad ever met in this town. And she brought him food from me the last 3 days that he was here. While I was trying to run things in North Carolina and get here to get him, she was here every one of those days, bringing him what he needed, being there for me. And I can't thank anybody more for that. And she's going to sing for us today for my dad as well. So.
I brought a stand too, if anybody needs it. So I think I was the friend at Tracy's house every night, whether I was invited or not. And it's because I wanted to sneak a little bit of whiskey and have a homemade meal made every single night. And they brought me in to their family, and they loved me like one of their own. And Drew especially took to me and always encouraged me with my music. And I feel very fortunate to have Tracy in my life because I am very close with my father. And I always feel like I can explain to people how cool my dad is and how my dad is my best friend and what he means to me and how I see him through my eyes. And it wasn't until I met Tracy and heard the way that she talks about her father and their relationship that I knew that we would always forever have that connection between us. And Drew held my son when he was a baby. He always asked me to play music for him. And the world lost an amazing person. And I think we can see that with everybody here. And so I'm going to play a song. I know he loved this song. I just learned it this morning, so if I mess up, then he would show me grace. So you guys should too.
Well, I'm not going to sing, but I didn't. We had sort of gotten to St. Augustine about 3 years ago, and my master's gardener friend from Maryland kind of put me on a guilt trip for not belonging to the garden here. So I've been involved with plants and plant diseases all my life, and so I come here, and there's Drew, and he knew everybody. He introduced me to everybody. If I, introduced me to cat. And so, and we live down the street and like everybody come here at kind of odd times. Usually there's no one around when we come, and so I haven't gotten to really know very many of you. But Drew was always here, and it was a comfort. And I felt safe because he was here. It was also, I didn't have to open the gate, you know. But my husband and I both really appreciated him, and again, just knowing that he was here was comforting. And we were so concerned when he got sick. I came here one late day, and oh my gosh, he didn't look so good, and it was cold, and we talked for quite a while. But I just said, saying, I wish there was something I could do to help, but I didn't really think there was anything I could do to help. He was in charge.
Oh, he was in charge.
Yeah, he made his own decisions, and he did. And so I just appreciated the chance to have known him. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
I'll piggyback you. Okay. So I'm Karen Fichette, and a similar story. Came here. One of the first places that I found was the garden, and Drew, and he was always here, and there was like an immediate draw and comfort to it. But every time I would come out, I was just telling a story. We lived just down the street, and I would disappear with my little compost bin and come here, and I'll be back in half an hour. 3 hours later, my husband's like, whatever, because I'm here and I'm just sharing time with Drew, and it was awesome. So he was something else. He definitely was a character, and there was just something magnetizing about him. And for me personally, honestly, he reminded me of my dad, who is no longer here. But he was the same man in charge, kind of lived the same lifestyle, and that was just that. And it was the way he wanted it, and I respected that. He had a lot of the same insight, and he loved to tell stories about characters he would meet along the way and different things. So I definitely, found a comfort in that. But he was everybody's gardener, and I think everybody knew Drew was here, like all odd hours and everything else, and we were all like, yeah, it's good. He's just, just happens to be here. So I was happy to know he was here too. And there was a time also, I am always feeling safe and I'm fine, I'm confident. But there was a night that I was here and it was a little late, and it was, I'm shining my cell phone to see the light. And Drew is like insisting, and he was like, are you okay? Do you want? And I said, no, I'm fine. And so he left, and then when I finally left, I didn't realize there was my garden angel lurking around, because he wouldn't leave until I was gone. But he wouldn't tell me he was doing that. So I still see him out there on his bike, and I'm like, so it's, he was definitely special. He planted a lot of seeds here, not only in the garden, but in people. Like we had a pact, he was gonna come with me. I had a home here, but it wasn't the home. I now sold this home. I have the home and a garden bed that's ready to go. And I know he's not here physically to help me plant that, but everything I put in there is probably going to be because of what he told me to do with it. So
I have his last seed list over here.
Oh, I love
I
it.
made copies of it.
I
I
love
found
it.
it in the Park C catalog.
That's awesome. Well, and then I just have one other. He was really proud of rose bush that he had here, and he had a few of them, and he gave them to a couple of us. And he'd always ask how it is, and the first thing I'd come in, that rose was such a symbol, because every time I'd come in, if I wasn't here for a long time, there was this blue, beaming bright rose on that bush, and there's Drew smiling, and I'm just like, it was interesting to me. It was just something I connected with. So, those roses meant a lot. So I bought a little glass rose, and I hope it's okay. It's kind of gaudy and kind of tacky, but it's a rose that'll be here forever, hopefully. So it's just a tiny little glass rose that I'm gonna, it's okay, affix with a wire just over to the porch where Rose always, it's where you always knew you could find Grace. So he means a lot. And I will say, I still go through town, and every time I see a bike, I'm like, is that true? That's gonna happen for a very long time, so he's with us. Special.
Okay.
I've known Drew ever since he was a garden member. I don't know how many years, but he was my right-hand man at the garden, so we have a lot of experience together. But I guess I don't want to say love-hate, because hate's such a bad word, but love-not-love relationship, because I was a decision maker. If I made decisions in his favor, he loved me. If I didn't make decisions in his favor, maybe not so much. So we had this ongoing battle, but we would always come back to the, we always come back to that place where he was my right-hand man. It was like, it was just that type of relationship. It was a battle sometimes, but then sometimes it was just so smooth and just so wonderful. But really had a lot of fun with him. One other thing is you see that chair over there. That chair, he would sit in that chair. That was his spot. That was his perch. And you would pull up in the garden and you would see him there. He was always there. It was just like, that was the first thing you would notice in the garden because his white hair would beam through all the plants and you could just see him there. So that was his spot. And that chair hasn't been out on that deck since he passed. And I'm sure a garden member has been bringing it out. Okay, you've been bringing it out since you got back from France. But the other day I saw it reappear and I was like,
Oh no.
is you back? I was like, for just a split second, I said it can't be. But so you, Annie's been tricking us with the chair there. But okay, well, hope maybe we just keep it out there or something. But it was neat to see that the other day. I guess the one thing that he had a lot of people that were trying to individually and within groups trying to help him. So he was very much, everybody was concerned about him because of who he was and the stories we've shared. I think David, you convinced him to finally go to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Well, he had so many people trying to convince him.
I know.
Whatever skills you got some really good convincing skills because after he talked to you, he was right there. And the one thing I'll remember in the hospital that I was just blown away is, well, first of all, they cut his hair and cleaned him up, and he looked like
saved that hair.
If you would have put a suit on him, he would have been on the cover of GQ. I mean, I'm serious. That is not like, they cleaned him up, and he was a good-looking guy after all that stuff was taken off. And the other thing I remember, I was like, I just couldn't believe it when I saw him. And the other thing that I remember is he had all the nurses and all the doctors on his side, bending over backwards to help him. And it just, I was just looking at that, I was like, how does someone come in his condition and get all these people to just, they were bending over backwards and they had smiles on their faces when they came in to see him. Because I was there for not all the time, but every time someone would come in, they would be like, just happy to help him. Sometimes when you go to a hospital, you don't see that kind of it, but that time I saw it. Every single person that walked in that room was just happy to help him, and he had a huge support system here, and we're just so sorry that we lost him and we lost him, and I'm just so happy we're going to be able to do something here at the garden, and you had this at the garden, so.
Me too.
So that's
I think
my
he'll be
2
happy
cents.
about that. And when I walked in the hospital the very first time when I came, like 2 days after he went in, the first thing, as soon as I walked in, all the nurses at the desk went, "Oh, are you Drew's daughter? We've been waiting to meet you." He's famous.
Definitely.
That hair, they would have just kept it. It would look pretty bad then, though. Renee, anybody else? Okay.
In 1995, right after my father died, I wrote a short poem that was meant as an homage to him. But I am sure that Drew would like this poem because of all of the anthropomorphic plant metaphors. So I'm going to read it. It's called Little Trees. There's a forest on a hill where all the trees have jobs to fill. They are a part of nature's plan that's mysterious to mortal man. The trees protect the forest creatures, one of many arboreal features. The big ones, standing proud and tall, combine to form a wooden wall. Bowing only to wind and rain, after the storm, they're straight again. eventually struck down dead, they fall into their earthly bed. Then it's up to the little trees apace to grow up and take their place.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's James. This is my wife Annie, and
James took the picture.
Drew played a very important role in our lives. I retired. We moved from Washington D.C. area in April 2014, and we decided to move here because we'd been here once for Easter, and we didn't know a soul. So Annie is a very passionate gardener. I'm more of a birder, and she joined Lakeland Village Community Garden. Drew was a greeter, he was a thinker, he was a gardening guru, and he was very passionate about the healing properties of ginseng and hemp,
And everything else.
which he would give you long explanations of. And it was always very comforting to come here, and in fact, if Drew wasn't here, the first question was, where's Drew? You know? And, you know, what I respect about Drew is I knew that he was really a man of modest means, but he never really asked us for anything, never really begged us for favors until later days when he was really just could not get up and move. I feel honored for having taken his debit card and I introduced him to the Jimmy John's veggie submarine sandwich, and he swore about that. I was honored to bring him that sandwich.
Oh yeah, he kept talking about that kombucha. No, really, he was. I heard about that kombucha.
And Annie was, has always been very passionate about recycling, and, donating your own clothes. And she would always nag me about this winter coat I had, LL Bean parka I wore once in my life when I went to Ottawa on a trip. And she said, well, what are you going to do with this coat? You're living in Florida, for Christ's sake, you know? So I remember it started, there were some cold periods. And I was thinking, this coat is it's like a walking sleeping bag. I think I'll just lend it to Drew. I wasn't going to give it to him, I was going to lend it to him. And he always said, oh yeah, I'm going to have it dry clean and give it back to you. But I think we felt really good on those cold nights, knowing that Drew had that LL Bean parka, keeping him warm, and we'll miss him. I can't say we always got along with him. I mean, he was a big fan of conspiracy theories. We learned not to get too far into political discussion.
That's why I was here hours. I love this.
Yeah.
I'm like, if I could just get one day of solid psychobabble out of my dad, I would shut up and listen, I swear.
Yeah, but
One day, just one day, psychobabble, that's what I would
what I
call it.
appreciate, Drew was always helpful to me because he would say, which birds he had spotted when you're here, and we'll miss him.
Thank you. These conspiracy theories were the best. I said, I was just talking to someone the other day, and I said I would give anything to be sitting at my dining room table with my dad sitting over at the couch, commenting. And that's how it would be like, there'd be something going on over here, and all of a sudden you would go, what did he just say? and you realize he was over here making like peanut gallery jokes, you know what I'm saying? Like he was like tuning in, And what? But if I could just have him over there talking about that Greta girl, that Greta climate change girl, he wouldn't know the number of the program that was programmed in her head. He would know who programmed her, who she was working for. I just really wish he was just alive to talk to me about this. And I'm not saying anything wrong about her. I'm saying my dad would have it figured out. And he would have it down to the number of whatever they programmed her with. You know what I'm saying? But he did a lot of reading, and he did a lot of exploring. He never stopped trying to learn, So, and there's a lot of things that I can't ask anybody else about, because they'd be like, what?
He had range.
He had a lot of range. A lot of range.
He should have, you're right.
Yeah, no.
You would have got a bunch of
Do what?
He should have had a YouTube channel.
No, yeah, right, yeah.
And you could just tune into what part of his reality that you resonated with.
Yeah. For like the last year before this all happened, I had been working to get my house in my name so I could loan against it and get us some property to get him onto with us. And that was the goal. That had been the goal for like the last 2 years, you know. And I had all these things that I had thought of that we were going to talk about. And all these questions like about Bigfoot and Sasquatch and stuff, you know? Like all, and Lemuria and all that. I had all these things that I was going to like sit on the porch with him and ask him all this stuff. And he was going to finally tell me about it all. And I was going to, you know, because it's never been time, you know. And I was always like busy and it was psychobabble, you know? And just shut up, old man, God, you know? I would just give anything to hear him just psychobabble for a while about his stuff, you know?
But if you just stayed with it, there would be just islands of excellence that you would resonate with. And then there
Yeah.
might be a whole, you know, swath that was a different frequency. But
Yeah.
if you just stayed there, you would surely travel.
No, well, he was walking through dreams when I was 7 and 8. He was telling me about how to balance myself in dreams, you know, and how to move through, you know. And I was little then, you know, when he was doing that, and so there's no doubt in my mind he's not moving around now. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, right. He was. I mean, that was just he was, you know. He was so
His voice
far.
was wonderful.
That was the biggest thing that was nice for me to find on his phone for the videos, you know. And that one I showed you of there at St. Francis House, and it's just him being funny, and he's just videoing. He's like, you know, and at the end of it, this is the boringest movie anybody ever made, and Dave's over there laughing, you know. And but I listened to that 200, 300 times over and over and over just to hear that voice, you know, and his laughter. And he was laughing, you know, and making everybody laugh, you know, because that's what he did. Just set out to make everybody laugh, you know.
My experience with him is that he had a lot of depth because his help that he offered, like the seeds that you're talking about, were really practical. When I first, before I got my plot, he was the one that told me, you know, that whole waiting and putting your name in. But he said, but if you're a certain kind of member, that you can use the compost and get familiar. And so my experience was this range of how he introduced me here, and my time that I would come would be in the evening, and always a comfort and the constancy and this depth, and how practical it was for me personally to start being able to come over, use the compost. Just somebody who takes the time and gives you. It's like they're meant for that conversation because it's a turning point in your life, because I was doing compost where I was living and attracting animals, and I mean it had a very practical basis because I also was really committed to composting, and he was the one that said, this is how you can do that, and it was no big deal to him, but he took the time.
Yeah, it was important to him for everybody to learn to grow their own garden. It was very important to him for everybody to learn that all you need is one pack of seeds, and go find some pots and go get yourself some dirt out of the sidewalk cracks and put a seed in it and sell them for $1. You know?